welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
Glad you're here.
That's the quietest intro we've ever had.
I know. Trying to allow those people that are relaxing, chilling out, listening to the podcast, and not feel like they have to go through a tornado to get into the first 30 seconds of our podcast.
Welcome to the Kingsway Podcast.
We don't want to put them to sleep, Brian. We want them to just find this as a relaxing conversation, enjoyment, a little laughter, a little pondering.
Mm-hmm.
We're on episode 2, season 2, The Chosen.
This sounds like an audiobook right now.
I know, I love it. My question to you is this. Did you remember, or did you find yourself in this episode wondering where they were at in a gospel?
Yeah, I definitely did, because they're just kind of walking around. I know Philip shows up a couple times in the Gospels. He shows up again in Acts, at least Acts 8. Is that Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch?
Yep.
So he shows up in this episode. Who's the girl who's with Thomas?
I can't remember her name. We looked it up before. It's like Marara.
It's somebody who's not, I don't think, in the gospel accounts. I assumed it was one of the other 3 or 4 Marys or Martha or somebody else. Like, that would make sense. But it's just somebody we don't know.
Yeah.
That's just helping pull out the character of the characters we do know.
That's what I find really cool about doing these podcasts, reviews of the episodes. And obviously we're going to talk about spoilers. So if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I didn't know. I know there are a few people, especially in the Kingsway community, that have jumped on board and are watching The Chosen.
Yeah.
I know quite a few people that are rewatching The Chosen and just like going back through. And I think what the hopeful thing of these like review podcast type things are that it kind of deepens the conversation around the episode. I know for myself, if I watch something and then no one else watches the show or no one else, like, it almost feels like I lose the ability to like enjoy it on a certain level. So having even like a conversation where you're just listening in, or maybe you're listening to this and you're going like, yes, I picked up on that, or like I had no idea who she was either. I think the goal of these is to kind of broaden our questions, broaden our understanding, and then maybe give us some things to like go like, that was something I didn't even pick up on. And we're learning. We're kind of learning together.
Yeah.
I found this episode, just to be clear, there's no defining moment in this episode that I feel like is in a gospel.
Yeah.
Like if there's nothing that I can point to and be like, we're in John blah blah blah, or we're in Matthew da da da, or we're in.
It's stuff that happened. Part of it. So Philip and Nathaniel are apostles. Mm-hmm. I think. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they are in the list of the 12. So Jesus called them at some point. But I don't think those accounts are in the Gospels.
No.
This is without looking it up. This is all off of memory. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
But I think you're right that then maybe there's a sentence or two, or maybe there's like this is, called them blah, 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 and maybe they have like their town or like their heritage or their families mentioned. So there's a little bit of detail. But I can tell you with certainty, there's not a great amount of detail on how these, like,
there's not
just
full-on stories.
No. And I think that's part of why this episode at times, like, there's a lot more I'm anticipating things, or like I'm excited because I'm like feeling like I understand where they're at and what's coming.
Yeah.
This episode just didn't have that for me. Like, it just, the whole time I'm like, I don't know where we are. I don't know what, it never felt untrue. It didn't feel like it wasn't true to the nature of the show or it wasn't good. It felt much more like I was watching something I didn't know the ending to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. There were a few times I felt like, okay, I know kind of where we're at. Some conversations between Jesus and Simon, where Jesus is talking about how he's going to need leadership and organization and structure when he's not here, but he's here right now. And that definitely alludes to some of the conversations they have later in the Gospels of, I'm going to be crucified. No, you won't. I'll kill everybody before Simon, just like predicting almost him swinging the sword at the Pharisee servant. And Jesus saying like, nope, that's not happening.
That's not happening. And I will agree. There definitely are some conversations about John the Baptist and some of the things like that John, is obviously preaching against, Herod and his family and like all of that stuff. And there's some small conversations between Peter and Matthew that allude to Matthew's going to write his gospel, and he's like recording everything Jesus is saying and what he's doing. Peter's not too cool on that, and like he thinks it's going to be used as a tool against Jesus, which is a really cool, I think it's a really cool kind of draw into even sometimes how the Bible has been weaponized through the centuries and millennia. Like we know that it was used in the negative way, even as early back as like segregation stuff. And, the slave trade, it's been used for obviously like a lot of the, I would say like the marches on Jerusalem and some of the,
the Crusades
and some of that junk, and it really has,
and
been
every
used.
side of the Reformation, which was super bloody too.
I mean, it really is. You can take, and that's exactly what Peter says in that point. He's like, you can twist words and make it say whatever you want it to say. And Matthew's like, but if you record the truth, it's not your job, to be scared of like what that's gonna do. Your job is just to record it. That's his mindset. And it's neat because even the other disciple, I don't remember who was there with Matthew. Thaddeus is like, I see what Peter's saying, like, be careful. And, like, I'm just like, gosh, man, like, it's true.
Thaddeus, I thought you were in with it.
Yeah, it's like, you're like, oh,
thought you were cool, man.
Yeah, and then hearing the women not get to be in school. And so, Mary has kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, that whole section with Mary and her friend who was with Thomas, them wanting to be in the know with some of the prophets and some of the memorizing parts of the Torah and whatever. Their desire for that leads them to want to do more, and Thomas is not super cool about it. Just a very like, you can ask me anything you want to know because I know everything.
Yeah.
I'll give you my interpretation, and that should be good enough for you.
And I don't know if it was supposed to come off as misogynistic as it did, or if it was just much more of like a class thing than like a male-female thing, much more like, you don't need to know that. I know that. I'm better, stronger. I don't know. It came across for me when I heard it like you're going to be my wife, and why does my wife need to know those things? I'm going to be the husband. I'll know those things. You can ask me.
Yeah, it definitely seemed that way to me too.
It was like, and to me, it was just like a really harsh thing that I'm like, my wife's pretty smart. Like,
I think I think that scene also came from a little jealousy because Thomas and Matthew seem to be the two higher educated, wealthier people,
highly intelligent.
So for the women to go to Matthew when one of them is the person seeing Thomas, it's like,
Their little competition.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I think if Thomas knew Matthew at all, I don't think he would be like worried because I don't think Matthew has those types of pursuits, at least at this point in his lifetime. And I think that the fun thing about this episode, what I found, and I'm going to ask you this next, like what you enjoyed most, or what you think will leave the most mark. Obviously, the ending has like some really cool verbiage and moments, which I feel like they do on like a really consistent basis.
Most people in his posse have that kind of story within the show so far.
Yeah.
The people we didn't get it from are Thaddeus, James and John. We saw them with Simon and Andrew's moment.
Yeah.
They were there, so that was theirs too, but the story wasn't framed from their perspective as much. So.
Yes.
But Mary, we saw just another one of those moments with Nathaniel. Yeah, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Nathaniel's moment at the end of this episode is extremely powerful. I mean, it's very, very well done. Very similar to Mary's, with like quotes about purpose and goal and family and feeling like it's all left and ruined and there's no hope and around his kind of career and all that he's built. But I was going to say, before we get to that, what I really enjoyed about this episode was it's kind of like the subtlety of the depth that they're building in these characters, where they're taking the time to, even like this episode, allow you to see the conversations between the disciples and a little bit of like, they're like not getting everything. They want to know more. They want to control more. They want to be in charge. They get somebody like Philip that shows up that has some experience.
With a rabbi who's like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a way that he talks that it kind of gives you this like flashpoint of like, yeah, he's a little bit wiser and a little bit more kind and a little bit more understanding than these guys are. You know what I mean? Like he's
the first person who seemed like a contemporary of Jesus. And I know Jesus has talked about John that way, but we've never seen them in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
He's the first person who seems like he gets what Jesus is doing more. He's still humble and submissive and like knows that Jesus is the Messiah and he's not, but he's the first person to seem like what the rest are wanting to be.
Yep.
And it's even funny that they talk about in the show that he looked like Jesus. That's not necessarily scriptural, but like the way he dressed, his face shape, his hair, his beard, like they thought it was Jesus from a ways off.
I think it's a stylistic point to just talk about his. Maybe it's obviously more symbolic, but it's definitely got a powerful tone to it. And I think it's fun that the first person that he latches onto is the person that's probably at the lowest and the biggest outcast in the group.
Yeah.
That's the person he wants to spend the time with.
I loved that Philip spent time with Matthew and like taught him some stuff to work with his hands and gave him the time of day and wasn't off put by him being awkward, even though I don't think he really was. It's just, yeah.
It's that
With
insecurity.
Philip.
It's that insecurity that Matthew carries around that he's always felt. And that's where he draws that circle on the ground and says, like, he's the point outside of everything that he's ever known.
Yeah.
And I love how Philip's like, yeah, I've only been doing that for 2 years. And I feel you. You know, if you felt that whole way your whole life, like, it is tough. But he doesn't, like, negate his feelings or tell him, like, oh, you're being, like, an idiot. Or, you know, like, he, like, completely, validates almost everything that Matthew's feeling. But then he also does a great job of coming back and going like, but you know, Jesus chose you, right? Like this wasn't an accident. And I think that's the thing that Peter is still learning, is that each person is chosen just like he was. You know, Peter has this like really cool story, but for some reason, whether it's pride or whatever, he just feels like his conversion was more powerful or more meaningful than others, and so he continually kind of puts himself in a position where he's a leader. I mean, he really is trying to lead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just felt like it was a really thoughtful episode to take the time to do that, and they did weave in, you know, Nathaniel's story. I thought a pretty good job of like,
which again, that and Philip's story, I don't think are really in the gospel accounts more than a sentence, if anything. But yeah, his story was told very well. Just him acting under that fig tree with the plans for the
all
synagogue he was going to build.
Synagogue,
Yeah.
It was powerful too because he was crying out in language of David and the Psalms, and it's a lament of pain and why have you left me and all this stuff. And I think there's a place in that a lot of people, including myself, have felt like I've had moments like that where you're like asking God to just show up. You know, it's like you don't have to make it true or whatever. And I think it was a place of like, I mean, Philip comes to see him and his house is just in shambles and he's in a hangover. I mean, he's drank himself into a sleep, and, you know, Philip doesn't judge him, but actually says, you know what, I need you to meet somebody. And that's the like friend bringing a friend to the person that has this living water, this bread, this new life. What'd you think? Let's just go there, because I think those that watch this episode, that's definitely going to be what sticks with me, right? Late at night, Jesus comes in, he goes out into this alley, there's Philip, there's Nathaniel, and Philip has just been really intense with Nathaniel at his house about like, you just need to come and see him. Like, you will not be disappointed. And so I thought there was going to be more build up to that. Like, I thought it was going to be Jesus kind of like a slow burn, you know, kind of like, hey, come in, eat a meal, hang out a little bit. This seemed to be like a really direct Jesus. Did that throw you off a little bit or surprise you?
A little bit, yeah, because Jesus, they see him down the street, Philip and Nathaniel, and Philip's like, this is my friend Nathaniel, and Jesus is like, Nathaniel. He's never heard about him before.
And
from
he's like
Philip,
the truth speaker. Like,
he
like has like a title
talking
for him
about
and
his
everything.
character.
Yep.
And you're like, whoa.
Well, and that's Nathaniel turns to Philip. He's like, what have you been telling him? And he's like, I didn't tell him anything. Like, he's like, I literally said I was going to visit a friend. That's all Philip had said to Jesus before.
It reminds me a lot of in the show, the way they portray it when they're at where James and John's dad's house.
Why can I not remember his name right now? Zebedee.
When they're at Zebedee's house, and Shmuel, the Pharisee, is looking through the window, and he's looking at Jesus when he's about to heal this guy, and Jesus says his thoughts out loud, which is a a thing that was recorded in Mark 2. We don't see that it's a Pharisee named Shmuel or whatever, but it's that kind of moment where he has a little bit of like X-Men telepathy, and he's just like, I got you. I know what you're.
Yeah.
I know who you are. I know what you're thinking before you've even said anything.
And I think he's alluded to in previous episodes, and obviously the Bible alludes to it too, that the prayer life with him and God is so intense that he's prepared and he has foreknowledge and some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that he has access to everything. It's that he has access through the Father to
Yeah,
this
it's
stuff.
that the Father is telling him things that will be pertinent, or giving him things in the moment or whatever.
Because that's that tension between his humanity and divinity that we've talked about.
You don't see him like, hey, Nathaniel looks at his hand with the ink written note from when he was praying earlier, the truth teller.
Yep.
Like I think it's just a moment of such closeness between him and the Father that the Father's working through him in that moment.
Absolutely. And obviously the Holy Spirit is playing a role at some part to, I think, empower and then bring that in. And there's what I loved about that scene, and I agree with you, it did feel abrupt. Like there was definitely a part of me that was just kind of like, wow, that was like, but I think it fit who Nathaniel was. He doesn't want to beat around the bush. He wasn't going to want it to be pampered or, whatever. He wanted to know. And I think his cry under the fig tree and like his prayer, like that's where Jesus was coming straight to him from. Like, I saw you under the fig tree.
It felt like Mary.
Yes.
When he was like, remember this from earlier? But instead of yesterday or 2 days ago, it's like, remember this from 30 years ago?
Yep. And it's, I mean, and obviously in Mary's thing, he like quotes that verse and like calls her by name. And like, it has that intensity of like, what do you do when you're afraid? What do you do? And he's like, I redeem you, whatever. And this had a very similar feeling. And the line that both of us, I think at the very end, James or Peter and Andrew come running up and they're like, hey, John the Baptizer's here. He's back. There's this great crowd of people that need your help. We got to leave tomorrow, and, Nathaniel's life has been turned upside down, and you can tell he's like, Philip's already asked him to follow him.
Oh, so the setup to that, I know what you're about to say. The setup to that is, you all know it because you watched the episode, hopefully, that he feels like his whole career's ruined because his building he was building fell, and the Romans will never hire him for anything, and he'll never make a name for himself to build the synagogue. And so when Philip makes that joke earlier, oh my gosh, what was even the joke? Well, he's like, you want to meet this man? He's like, I don't know. He's like, you don't have anywhere else to be, do you?
Dude, and
you don't have to be to work in the morning.
Too soon. He's like, what are you going to do? You don't have to be to work tomorrow. Like
so when Jesus comes out, oh, man.
Dude, it's so good, though, because the line, and correct me if I think I have it right, but he says, I need somebody to help me build something, meaningful or whatever.
Build something that draws people to prayer and closer to God.
And can you start tomorrow?
Yeah.
And it's just like that moment where you're like, oh, dude, how'd you do? It felt like, like that secret side, like no look knockout punch where you're like, man, I was paying attention to this episode. I thought I knew which direction it was going to go. And it just completely, it's like, gosh, how do you not respond with like, yes, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Like how can you not respond that way?
Yeah.
And it doesn't show Nathaniel's response. I mean, obviously we know and we fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
But I was blown away with how the whole episode felt like this slow burn. And then the ending was just a deep, like resounding. I know you.
Yeah.
I know about you. And I don't just want you to follow me. I need you and I want you to follow me. Because I have a purpose and a plan for you, and I want you to come and play a part of what we're doing. It's that whole idea of your story interacts with the larger story of what God's up to, and if you allow it to, interweave. And it's just in my mind,
so good.
I think if you find yourself on a path in life where maybe you have a goal or an aspiration, or you're driven, and then that ends, or like it doesn't work out like you want to, or you haven't achieved what you're hoping to, and whether you're 20, 40, or 60 or 80, and you're looking back or you're looking ahead at like what is lost, I think this is a perfect episode to just go like, God, if you're not dead, you're not done. God has a plan. God has some things still ahead of you, and it may not look like a physical synagogue that you thought it would, but it'll look like a kingdom movement of spiritual domain and engagement that's larger than any synagogue would have had an impact. And it doesn't have that physical description, but it goes beyond description in other ways.
Yeah.
Which is cool, because that in my mind, it's that whole idea of like, I'm building a kingdom. You want to come and help me build a kingdom?
Yeah.
In his mind, he's like, well, I was more thinking like but
yeah,
but I'm in.
Yeah. So,
as always, love to see your comments or anything that's going on with what you thought the best parts of this video, or this episode, season 2, episode 2. I'd love to hear anything that you picked up on that we didn't, or maybe there was a part that you're like, man, this is a really neat thing that you missed. And there's so many little nuances that they do. I know there's more that we miss from time to time. Even some of the ways that they were taking care of the wood, or doing some of the I just think there's more things that we're missing, that sometimes I'm like, man, I'd love to know why they chose that, or why they interacted with that, and what area they're at. And looking at that giant Roman city, I'm like, is that like an archaeological place now that you can still go to, or I don't know.
Caesarea Philippi.
So I don't know. There's just some cool things I know that could be explored us more. But as always, we're always looking for Q&A questions too. If you'd like to hear us talk about different things and topics. I know we have a whole other set of podcasts that are coming out on Thursdays around our values and our vision right now. And I think those are getting ready to wrap up. Highly encourage, if you're a part of
that Thursday one keeps going.
Yes.
Even after the vision and values.
This is just the topics that we're on right now. I think the section that we're on.
Yeah.
However, if you are in the Kingsway community and you haven't watched that, we have a specific playlist on our YouTube channel, and I know on our podcast for Spotify and Apple, you can easily find them. Our vision and values would be a great thing to go through. Just a way to connect with us, know where we're going, what we're up to, how we make decisions, what it kind of empowers us, even at a volunteer level, but also at the highest levels of kind of leadership. So, any closing thoughts, Ryan? Anything you're thinking about from this?
No, I think I've said pretty much everything. I just love this episode. It felt like just another good episode from The Chosen. Not something that did something drastically different, but just a continuation of the same thing they're really good at doing.
I agree. It felt like it added a little bit of depth. Gained a few characters that I care about.
Yeah,
and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah,
in the
me
future.
too.
So, hey, as always, hit the subscribe button if you want to. Hit the like button. It always helps us get out to see and have more people look and see and join. And we appreciate you if you've subscribed and you like. And hopefully we'll see you on the next episode. So have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you later.
See ya.